Here's how I made this year's 4th of July flash cakes. Cake number 1 is vanilla cake with strawberry filling, and I started out with a white buttercream base. I added this USA cake decoration as a topper. Then I piped a bright red buttercream border along the bottom and a royal blue border along the top. I bagged up some white buttercream and piped this ruffled swooped border along the sides. I thought it would be really cute to have those swoops be red, white, and blue, so I added red and blue right on top and underneath. And last, I grabbed my 4th of July sprinkle mix and add this to the top border. Here's what the cake looks like all finished. Cake number 2 is lemon cake with blueberry filling. I started out with an all-white buttercream base, and then I piped a border along the bottom and the top. I wanted this one to give cutesy, vintage, girly 4th of July, so using 2 different piping tips, I piped this double swoops going along the sides. And with a much larger star tip, I added these little details up top. I tied all of these little red bows and added them to the top of the cake. And I just finished this one off with the 4th of July sprinkle mix. Here's what this one looks like. Cake number 3 is red velvet cake with cream cheese filling. I started out with a white buttercream base, and then I used my striped scraper. I went back in with red buttercream to fill in those empty spaces, and then I just grabbed my regular clear scraper until I get a smooth finish. I made some bright blue chocolate ganache and then added this drip to the top of the cake. Once that dried, I bagged up some red buttercream and piped these little dollops on top of the cake evenly spaced out. I went back in with white buttercream and piped some more right in between those, and then the same thing with the blue. I added 4th of July sprinkles and then finished it off with these heart flag ring toppers. I placed a few of them on that top border, and here's what that one looks like. Cake number 4 is funfetti cake with vanilla buttercream filling. This one is a heart cake, and I started off with a white buttercream base. I wrote Happy 4th on top of the cake, and then using that same royal blue color, I piped a border along the bottom and the top. I piped this little swooped border along the sides in red buttercream and did the same thing to the bottom border. I added one more to the top in a reverse shell design. Switching back to white, I do another border underneath that red onto the middle and then the reverse shell border on the bottom. I just had to do another red, white, and blue along the sides, so I went with this blue ruffled border and then these bigger blue shells on the top. And if this cake wasn't already extra enough, I added these cherries along the top border. I grabbed these larger pearl sprinkles and add them to the bottom of that blue shell. And I finished this one off by adding some more of those pearls in between the top border. Here's what this one looks like. Cake number 5 is funfetti cake with raspberry filling. And this one has to be my favorite design. I started out with this really pretty sky blue buttercream base. Then I bagged up some red, white, and blue buttercream using the same star tip on all of them. And I piped these cute little bomb pops all around the sides of the cake. I wanted them going in all different directions to create this sort of pattern on the sides. And once I finished piping all of those bomb pops, I go back in with red, white, and blue frosting using a really large star tip to create this patterned border. And last, I just add that 4th of July sprinkle mix to the top. Here's what this one looks like. Cake number 6 is red velvet cake with cream cheese filling, and this is another vintage heart cake. I started out with this beautiful navy blue buttercream base and piped the same color border on the top and the bottom. Then I added a double swoop border along the sides and then piped those large shells on top. I added some cherries to the border, and then I finished it off with some sprinkle mix. I covered the entire top of the cake in this 4th of July sprinkles. Here's what it looks like. Cake number 7 is vanilla cake with strawberry filling. This one has to be my second favorite design. I started out with an all-white buttercream base, then bagged up red, white, and blue buttercream using large star tips. I piped the US flag on top of the cake. Then using those same exact piping bags, I piped this patterned red, white, and blue border along the bottom. I placed white star sprinkles to the blue section, and then I added that 4th of July sprinkle mix all along the bottom. I think it came out so cute. Here's what this one looks like. Cake number 8 is funfetti cake with vanilla buttercream filling. This one has another red and white striped buttercream base. I added blue chocolate drip along the top, and once that dried, I bagged up red buttercream and piped these little dollops on top of the cake. I added 4th of July sprinkles, and finally I placed these really cute silver cupcake toppers along the top. Now this one's finished. Here's what it looks like. Cake number 9 is lemon cake with raspberry filling. I started out with this two-tone buttercream base with navy blue on the bottom and white on the top. Using red, white, and blue buttercream and a small round piping tip, I piped these little stars along the sides of the cake. I started off with red, and then I went in with blue to fill in any spaces in between. And I finished it off with white, and if you haven't already noticed, these are fireworks. I piped some little polka dots in all 3 colors, and then I add this Party in the USA cake topper. I piped a patterned red, white, and blue border along that sign. Then I just add some 4th of July sprinkle mix, and then I add these 2 US flags to the top border. Here's what this one looks like, and finally, cake number 10 is red velvet cake with cream cheese filling. I loved the Bomb Pop design so much, and I remember it did really well last year. They were the first ones to sell out, so I decided to run it again. I started out with that sky blue buttercream base. Then I piped those Bomb Pops going in all different directions, and for the top border, I mixed all of my leftover red, white, and blue into one piping bag since this was my last cake, and I piped the border along the top. But why does it look like a melting Bomb Pop? I added the 4th of July sprinkle mix, and now this one is all done. Here's what it looks like. And here's a close-up of all 10 4th of July cakes. I posted these for sale on my Instagram and they sold out in about 2 to 3 hours. They sold for $74 each. I know that's a bit low, but I thought it would be fun to sell them for $74 since we're celebrating July 4th, 7-4. These were so much fun to make. I hope you guys like this one.